Red herring. What if the truth was right in front of you, and you never saw it? Not because it was hidden, not because someone locked it away in a vault, but because your attention was gently, quietly pulled somewhere else. That's the first trick. Not a lie, not a shout, just a gentle nudge, a clever hand gesture while the real move happens elsewhere. You're looking left when everything important is happening to the right. It's not magic. It's not always evil. Sometimes it's even accidental, but it has a name. Red herring. It sounds harmless, like a storybook fish, but it's one of the most quietly powerful manipulation tools in existence. A way to twist the story, to bend perception, to rewrite what matters, all without ever actually changing the facts. The trick is simple. Distract, mislead, confuse, not with big lies, but with smaller truths that don't really matter. A red herring isn't about hiding information. It's about making you chase the wrong piece. It starts like this. You're in the middle of a conversation, or maybe an argument. You raise a valid point, maybe even the point, and suddenly the topic shifts. Not drastically, just enough to make you forget what you were trying to say. You're talking about one thing, and they bring up something else, something emotional, dramatic, attention-grabbing, and now you're off balance. You're no longer holding the thread, you're holding a decoy. Sometimes it's as small as someone bringing up your tone instead of your words. You try to explain what's wrong, and they say, "Well, I don't like how you said it." And just like that, you're no longer talking about the issue, you're defending your volume. The red herring worked, and it doesn't stop there. It can show up in politics, in relationships, in the media, in families. Anywhere there's tension, anywhere there's something uncomfortable to face, there's a temptation to throw a red herring into the fire and walk away from the heat, because distraction is easier than confrontation. And here's the thing. Our minds are wired to chase what's immediate, what's emotional, what's loud. We follow drama. We react to sudden changes. And so, when someone throws a red herring into the room, something shocking, confusing, or emotionally charged, it's not our fault that we follow it. It feels natural, like we're still on track, like we're still talking about what matters. But we're not. The true topic, the real question, the actual issue, is left behind, quietly gathering dust, while we chase shadows. Why do people use red herrings? Sometimes it's intentional, a tool to dodge accountability, a way to escape blame. If you're cornered in an argument, and don't want to admit fault, why not point to something else, something unrelated, but emotionally charged, something that pulls the conversation away from what really matters? It's not always about winning. Sometimes it's just about escaping. Other times, it's unconscious. People do it without realizing, because the real subject is too heavy, too raw, too risky. So they reach for something safer, another topic, another complaint, another fire to put out. Anything but this, anything but now. So how can you spot a red herring? It's not always obvious, but you can start by asking, is this thing we're talking about actually connected to the point we started with, or did we drift without realizing it? It's a small question, but it can pull you back to center, because the red herring only works if you forget what you were aiming for. If you remember, it loses power. Here's a simple example. Imagine you're watching a trial. The defense attorney doesn't have a solid rebuttal, so instead they bring up the defendant's rough childhood. They talk about pain, poverty, hard beginnings. Now that's sad. It's emotional. It's human. But it's not the question. The question was, did they commit the crime? The red herring was, feel bad for them. Focus on their story, not their actions. And you can feel it, can't you? That quiet shift, that emotional hook pulling you away from the original thread. It's subtle, it's smooth, it's powerful, and when it works, it rewrites the narrative. Suddenly, you're not holding the person accountable, you're holding their past. But here's the truth. Empathy and accountability can exist at the same time. You can care about someone's pain and still ask hard questions. You don't have to choose one. That's what red herrings want you to forget. Let's bring it closer to home. Think about a conversation you've had with someone you love. You bring up a concern, maybe something they said, something that hurt you. Instead of hearing it, they bring up something you did, maybe last week, maybe last year. It's not a lie. It happened, but it's not what you were talking about. That's a red herring. And now you're defending yourself instead of being heard. It's a dance, one where no one's really listening, one where everyone's chasing the wrong song. So what do you do when it happens? First pause, breathe, notice the shift, then gently, calmly, bring it back. Say something like, "That might be true, but it's not what I was talking about." Bring the focus back to the original thread. Hold it steady. Don't chase the decoy, because that's how you stay clear. That's how you stay grounded in the truth, even when someone tries to make the truth feel slippery. The red herring is just one trick, one of many in the long winding book of manipulation. But it's powerful because it's quiet, because it wears the mask of relevance, because it doesn't look like a lie. It looks like part of the story. But don't be fooled. Just because something is emotionally charged doesn't mean it's connected. Just because it feels urgent doesn't mean it matters right now. The red herring whispers, "Look over here." But you don't have to. You can stay with the truth, even if it's quiet, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it asks you to sit still and look at something you'd rather avoid. That's the real power, not in chasing noise, but in choosing clarity. So the next time a conversation shifts, when the topic slides sideways, when something tugs at your emotions but doesn't quite fit the question, notice the detour, and gently bring yourself back to what matters, to what's real, because the truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs you to listen. Anchoring. Have you ever bought something and then felt like you didn't really choose it? You thought it was your decision, your money, your choice, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe someone planted a number in your head, quietly, casually, and that number stuck there, like a seed. That's anchoring. It's not loud. It doesn't push. It whispers. Anchoring is one of the oldest tricks in the book, and the most invisible. You won't notice it when it happens, but you'll feel its effects long after. Let's start simple. Imagine you're shopping for a new phone. You walk into a store and see a sign, flagship model, $1,799. You blink. That's way too much. So you look down the row. There's a different phone, smaller, fewer features. It's $999. Suddenly, that second phone, it doesn't seem so bad. It almost feels reasonable. But pause right there. That shift you felt, that change in your gut, that's anchoring. You didn't decide $999 was fair. Your brain just compared it to the first number it saw, $1,799. That was the anchor, and it pulled your judgment toward it. Like gravity, the trick works because of how the human brain is wired. Though we're bad at estimating value in a vacuum. We don't ask, is this worth $999? We ask, is this less than the other thing I just saw? We compare, we contrast, we adjust. But here's the twist. Anchors don't have to be relevant to work. You could show someone a spinning wheel with random numbers, ask them to guess the population of a city, and their answer will shift, depending on the number the wheel landed on. It doesn't make sense, but it happens over and over again, because anchoring doesn't operate on logic, it works on proximity. Whatever's in front of you first shapes everything that follows, and that makes it dangerous. Let's go deeper. Anchoring doesn't just apply to shopping or trivia. It shows up in salary negotiations, in dating, in courtrooms, in therapy. Anywhere there's a number, a decision, or a comparison, anchoring is lurking. A lawyer might suggest a sky-high compensation in a lawsuit, not because they expect to win that much, but because it sets the frame. Now the jury is thinking in millions, not thousands. The defense has to work uphill, just to bring the number back down. That's anchoring. Or imagine a first date. Someone says, "Most of my exes were really intense. I'm way more relaxed." Now you're anchored. You'll compare their behavior to this imaginary group of chaotic exes, even if you've never met them. See how subtle that was? Anchoring isn't always numbers. Sometimes it's ideas, expectations, even stories. You say something first, loud enough to stick, then everything that follows gets measured against it. Let's try a little thought experiment. I'm going to ask you a question. Is the height of the tallest redwood tree more or less than 1,200 feet? Got your guess? Now how tall do you think the tallest redwood actually is? You're probably thinking a bit under 1,200, maybe 900, 1,000. But here's the catch. The tallest redwood ever recorded is just under 400 feet. So why did your brain guess something so much higher? Because I anchored you. I gave you a number first, and your brain used it, without question. That's the power of anchoring, and it doesn't stop when you know about it. Even awareness doesn't protect you. You can't logic your way out of it. It happens deep, before you even realize you're comparing. It's like a hidden hand guiding your choices, not with force, but with suggestion. Anchoring is used in advertising. It's used in pricing menus, in job interviews, in online dating profiles. Look at a dating app. Someone writes in their bio, "I usually date people who are really driven." Now you're thinking, am I driven? Should I act more ambitious? They set the tone. They anchored you to their standard. Now you're reacting to an invisible expectation. It's subtle, but it's everywhere. Here's where it gets darker. Some people use anchoring not just to sell you things, but to control you. They'll anchor your idea of normal, of love, of respect. They'll say other people wouldn't put up with you, or most people would have left by now. What are they doing? Setting an anchor, making you believe that their behavior, however cruel or distant, is generous. Compared to this fictional normal, they seem like a saint. That's manipulation. It traps you in a mental framework that they designed, one where you feel lucky for being mistreated, because you're anchored to something worse. Let that sink in. Anchoring doesn't always work through facts. It works through fear, through assumptions, through tone. It creates a reality for you to react to. Before you even get to decide for yourself, you've probably already experienced this. Maybe you walked into a conversation already feeling guilty, because someone told you what most people would expect. Maybe you lowered your standards, accepted less, not because you wanted to, but because someone else set the bar, and you didn't notice it moved. Anchoring is quiet. It's not a scream. It's a whisper that changes everything. But here's the thing. Once you see it, you can pause. Not escape it completely, but slow it down. You can say, what am I comparing this to? Is that anchor even real? What would I think if I saw this fresh? Ask those questions. Anchor yourself to truth, to fairness, to what you believe is reasonable. You don't have to be paranoid, just aware, because the moment someone drops a number, an idea, or a frame, you get to decide whether to accept it. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be pulled. Reciprocity exploitation. What if the smallest favor you accept isn't really a favor at all? Let's start with something simple. A free sample at the grocery store. A stranger holds it out with a smile. Try one, they say. It costs nothing. Just a bite. You take it. You nod. You say thank you. And then, without quite knowing why, you feel something stir. A little nudge in the back of your mind. You find yourself slowing down near the shelf. Maybe you pick up the product. Maybe you even toss it into your cart. You didn't have to, but you did. That's the trick. That's reciprocity. A gentle pressure disguised as politeness. A loop quietly closed the moment you said thank you. This is how it begins. Not with a demand. Not with manipulation that feels dark or heavy or wrong. It begins with something nice. Something kind. Something thoughtful. But that's exactly what makes it powerful. Reciprocity exploitation works because it doesn't feel like manipulation at all. It feels like fairness, like good manners, like balance. But is it? Or is it just the oldest trick in the book? Let's stay here for a while. Let's sit with this feeling, the one where a gift comes with no strings, and yet you feel tied to it anyway. Humans are wired for exchange, for give and take. Across cultures, across time, across generations, we respond to kindness with the urge to give back. It's not written in law, it's not a rule, but it feels like it might as well be. Someone helps you move, you help them paint their fence. Someone buys your coffee, you cover their lunch next time. Someone listens to your story, you feel compelled to listen to theirs, even if you're tired. That's how it works. A quiet ledger in the mind, not forced, just expected. But here's where it gets dark, because not everyone gives to be kind. Some people give to control. They smile when they hand you the favor. They say, "No worries," or "I just thought you'd like it," and maybe you would. Maybe you do. But somewhere underneath, something else is happening. A seed is planted. Now you owe them. Or at least, it feels like you do. And they know that. They're counting on it. That's the real game. Reciprocity doesn't need to shout. It doesn't force you. It waits. It leans on the weight of your own conscience. And it knows sooner or later, you'll pay it back. Even if you didn't ask for it. Even if you didn't want it. Even if you didn't realize the favor wasn't really free. Let's say someone gives you a ride. Out of nowhere. You didn't plan it. You didn't need it. But they insisted. Then a week later, they ask for a big favor. Something you don't want to do. Maybe it feels uncomfortable. Maybe it feels unfair. Do you hear their voice echoing? "Remember when I helped you?" And suddenly, the favor isn't optional. But it doesn't feel like a trap. That's the brilliance of it. It feels like you're just being decent, returning the kindness, doing the right thing. Except it's not the right thing. It's a lever. They gave you something small, so they could take something big, and you never saw it coming. Let your mind wander now. Drift back to the last time you said yes, when everything inside you wanted to say no. Was it after someone complimented you? Did they buy you something first? Did they go out of their way? Just a little too far. That tug in your gut, that uneasy sense that something was being set up, that was your instinct warning you. Not every act of kindness is sincere. Sometimes it's a setup, a string wrapped in velvet, a hook hidden in sugar, and if you're not careful, you'll feel like you tied it around your own wrist. But here's the twist. Reciprocity isn't evil. It's natural. It builds friendships, cultures, peace. It creates trust. But when someone understands that, and uses it to make you act against your will, that's when it turns dark. Like handing someone a pen, just so you can make them sign a contract. Like giving someone warmth, just to turn the heat off later. Like holding the door open, just to follow them through it. Think back. How many times have you felt pressured to return a favor that didn't feel like a favor at all? Now imagine this being used over and over, at scale, in marketing, politics, religion, relationships. You got a free gift, so now you should sign up. We gave you a discount, so don't complain. I did something nice, so now I get to make the rules. That's the loop. They give a little, you give a lot, and in the end they win. It doesn't feel like coercion, it feels like obligation. But the truth is, you never signed the contract. Not really. You can say no, you can break the cycle, but it takes awareness. It takes being honest with yourself. Do I want to return this favor, or do I just feel like I have to? Let's pause here. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture someone handing you a small gift, a flower, a compliment, a coffee. Now imagine them asking you for something, right away, or later. Doesn't matter. The pull is still there. The inner voice says, be fair. But fairness doesn't mean giving up your power. It doesn't mean trading your peace for someone else's plan. It doesn't mean saying yes out of guilt, because that guilt, that's not yours. It was planted by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And if you felt it, if you've fallen into that trap, you're not weak. You're human. You responded like anyone would. But now you know. Reciprocity can be beautiful, a cycle of giving and receiving that makes the world softer, or it can be a silent cage. The difference, intent. So next time someone gives you something without asking, pause, ask yourself, what do they want? And more importantly, what do I want? Because you don't owe anyone your time, your energy, or your peace. Just because they gave you a token. Manipulation doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a smile. But now you can see through it. That's the trick. And now you know the game. False urgency. What if time wasn't just ticking? It was being used against you. The trick begins quietly. There's no warning, no alarm bell, just a subtle push, a gentle pressure, like someone tapping a clock behind your ear, whispering, hurry up, you're running out of time. But you're not. Still you feel it, that rising heat in your chest, that subtle tension in your fingers. You don't know where it's coming from. You just know, you have to decide, now. Fast. That's false urgency. A shadow in the shape of a deadline, a clock set forward just enough to make you flinch. It doesn't look dangerous, not at first. It might come wrapped in politeness, in excitement, in a limited time offer, but it's not about time. It's about control, because when you feel rushed, you stop thinking clearly. You reach for safety, for shortcuts, for the option that feels easiest. And someone else, someone behind that invisible ticking, is counting on that. This isn't an emergency, it only feels like one. False urgency is a psychological sleight of hand. It doesn't use force. It uses your own brain against you. It hijacks the way you process time. It pulls the strings of stress and fear and masks them as momentum. Suddenly, you're speeding toward a decision that doesn't belong to you. Not really. You didn't choose the moment. You didn't set the pace. You were nudged. Sometimes it's a countdown on a website. Only 10 left in stock. Offer expires in 3, 2, 1. And even though you weren't looking for it, now you have to have it. The product becomes less important than the pressure itself. Other times it's more personal. A conversation, a relationship, a favor. Someone needs an answer right now. They can't wait. They won't wait. And so you rush. But here's the thing. Truth doesn't panic. Real urgency feels different. You can sense it. It carries weight. It shows its reasons. False urgency hides behind fog and flashing lights. It stirs up dust just long enough to cloud your thinking. It doesn't want you to ask questions, it wants you to react. And most of the time, you do, because we're wired to respond to danger, even when there isn't any. Our minds are built to solve problems quickly. When time feels short, it's an ancient reflex. But in the wrong hands, that reflex becomes a weapon. Think back. Can you remember a time when you made a decision too fast? A purchase, a promise, a yes you didn't really mean? Were you thinking it through, or were you just trying to stop the pressure? That pressure was the point. False urgency isn't about getting a yes. It's about not giving you time to say no. It creates noise. It creates tension. It creates a version of the world where standing still feels unsafe, where slowing down feels like failure. But it's a trick, a carefully planted illusion designed to shrink your world to one small window, now or never. But what if that window isn't even real? What if the door never closed at all? Imagine you're standing in a hallway. On either side are doors, options, choices, paths. But one door is flashing. It says, "Closing soon." A red light blinks. A voice says, "Last chance." You panic. You push through that one. You don't even check the others. That's how it works. False urgency doesn't need to convince you of the best choice. It just needs to make you forget there are others. You're not broken for falling for it. Everyone does. That's what makes it so powerful. The illusion of time slipping away flips a switch in your brain. A switch that says, don't think, just go. But if you pause, if you wait, the illusion fades, the flashing light dims, the fake clock stops ticking. Because there was never a fire, only smoke. You may notice this trick more in certain places. Sales calls, high-pressure jobs, even some relationships. Anywhere someone benefits from your quick agreement. Anywhere someone fears your silence more than your yes. They don't want your clarity. They want your compliance. And so they hand you a clock with no batteries and tell you it's about to explode. You don't have to believe them. Not every deadline is fake. Some decisions are urgent. Some choices do expire. But when urgency is real, it comes with truth, with reasons, with respect. False urgency comes with noise, with manipulation, with a voice that says, don't think, just act. But you can think, you can breathe, you can slow everything down. You don't owe your answer to a timer. You owe it to yourself. So the next time you feel that sudden pulse, that rising pressure to decide right now, just for a second, ask yourself, who set this deadline? What happens if I don't respond right away? Whose pace am I really moving at? You might find that the pressure isn't real, that the moment isn't actually closing, that the ticking sound you hear is just someone else's hand on the clock, winding it faster than it needs to be. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The manipulation loses its grip. The trick becomes transparent. And in that space, in that calm breath between impulse and choice, you take back your power. False urgency wants to rush you past your instincts. But your instincts are wise. They just need time to speak. So give them that time. Let the noise fade. Let the fake countdown hit 0. And then when you're ready, move forward. Not out of fear, not out of pressure, but because you've decided with your whole mind that it's what you want. The timer was never real, but you are. And that awareness, that moment of clarity in the middle of the storm, is how you win. Not by running faster, but by stopping just long enough to see the trick for what it is, and choosing not to play. Creating scarcity. What if something only felt valuable because someone told you it was rare? Not rare in the literal sense, like gold or ancient fossils, rare in a way you can't quite prove. Rare because they said, this is the last one, or only a few people have access to this. And just like that, your heartbeat skips, your interest sharpens, you lean in a little closer, even if you didn't want it 5 minutes ago. Now you do. That's not coincidence. That's a tactic. It's called creating scarcity, and it's one of the darkest manipulation tricks in the book. It starts quietly. No pressure, no big pitch, just a sentence, dropped like a pebble in a still pond. We only have a few left. This is invite only. Only 10 people will ever get this. You hear those words, and something shifts inside you. The small flicker of fear. Fear that you're about to miss something, that other people will have it, and you won't, that you'll be left out, forgotten, behind. Scarcity feeds on that feeling, on that invisible pressure we all carry, the urge to not miss out, to be included, to belong, to own something others can't. It doesn't matter whether you need the thing, or even want it. Once it's labeled as scarce, it changes shape. It becomes magnetic. Think back. Have you ever stood in line for something not because you needed it, but because it was limited edition? Have you ever added something to your cart just because a little red banner said only 3 left in stock? Or clicked faster, not because you were ready, but because a countdown timer told you time was running out? That wasn't urgency. That was design. Scarcity isn't about what's real. It's about what feels real. It's the illusion of rarity, a fog created on purpose, to push you to act faster, to feel less certain, to stop thinking and start grabbing. Why does it work so well? Because the human brain is wired for survival. Back in the wild, if food was scarce, you moved quickly. If shelter was scarce, you claimed it fast. Scarcity once meant survival, and today in the digital age, we still carry that wiring. Except now, it's used against us. Manipulators, whether they're selling products, pushing ideas, or controlling people, use scarcity as a lever. They pull it slowly, then suddenly. First they create the feeling, this isn't for everyone. Then they add pressure, it's almost gone. And finally, the hook, if you don't act now, you never will. And just like that, logic fades. You move on instinct. You click, you buy, you agree. Even if, deep down, something feels off. Scarcity doesn't always show up in stores or online. Sometimes it lives in relationships, in whispers like you'll never find someone like me again, or no one else will understand you like I do. It's not about love, it's about control, framing themselves as one of a kind, to make you feel like you can't leave. It shows up in jobs. You won't get another opportunity like this. In friendships, you should be lucky I'm still here. In social groups, you're either with us or out. It's everywhere. Invisible, subtle, powerful. But here's the truth. Most things labeled rare aren't. Most only one left claims aren't true. Most exclusive offers aren't really limited. They're just words, used to flip a switch in your brain that makes you chase, instead of choose, because that's what scarcity does. It turns patience into panic. It swaps curiosity for craving. It makes you think you're deciding, when really you're reacting. Let's slow down for a moment. Let's go back to the last time you felt that pull, that sudden rush of I need to act now, or I'll regret it forever. Can you remember what it was? Was it a sale, a relationship, an offer too good to be true? Did it feel like a gentle nudge, or a shove? Now ask yourself, was the thing actually rare, or was the feeling of rarity carefully planted? You see, scarcity is like a shadow. It doesn't exist on its own. It needs light, and someone to block it, someone to shape the illusion, someone who knows exactly where to stand, to make you forget the truth. And the truth is this: if something is truly valuable, it doesn't need pressure, it doesn't need tricks, it doesn't need a ticking clock, or flashing banner, or a guilt-laced ultimatum. Real worth speaks quietly. It waits. It doesn't chase you. It lets you choose it freely. But manipulation doesn't wait. It grabs. It corners. It pretends it's your only chance, when really it's just noise. So the next time someone says, "There's only one spot left," or "This offer expires in 5 minutes," pause, breathe. Look deeper. Is this scarcity or is it strategy? Because once you see it, really see it, you can't unsee it. You'll notice it in advertisements, in sales pitches, in emails that scream "last chance." You'll notice it in people too, in the way they make themselves seem irreplaceable, in the way they withhold just enough to keep you chasing. But you don't have to chase. You don't have to believe every flashing light or dramatic countdown. You can choose. You can wait. You can say, "If it's meant for me, it won't need a trick to get me there." And that's power, the kind of power they hope you don't notice. Because when you stop reacting, when you stop rushing, when you stop letting scarcity drive your choices, you step out of their grip. You take back the pen. You write your own pace. And suddenly their urgency becomes just noise in the distance. So the next time someone whispers, "This is the last one," smile. Because maybe it is, but maybe it's just the oldest trick in the book. And you just opened it. Social proof exploitation. What if your decisions were never really yours? Not because someone forced your hand, not because you were tricked in a loud or obvious way, but because everyone else was doing it, or at least it looked like they were. You see a group of people looking up at the sky. You look too. A long line outside a restaurant. You assume the food is good. A product says 10,000 sold today. You buy it faster. You're not copying on purpose. You're responding to something ancient, something hidden, something almost invisible. It's called social proof. And when it's real, it can be helpful. But when it's fake, when it's carefully planted, designed and staged, it becomes something else. A quiet manipulation, a gentle push from behind, a trick you don't even see. Let's pause here for a moment. Look back, gently, at your own choices. Think of a time you bought something just because it had thousands of reviews, or joined something because everyone else seemed to be joining. Did you ever stop to ask if those reviews were real, if the crowd was actually there? Social proof works because you are human, because you don't want to be the only one, because your brain is wired to believe that consensus means safety. But what if that consensus is fake? That's where the manipulation begins. Let's imagine a hallway. You walk in and see 4 people facing the wrong direction in an elevator. The doors open. You step inside. Do you face the door like normal? Or do you turn around like them? Most people turn around, not because they're told to, not because they want to, but because of one quiet thought: they must know something I don't. That's social proof. It lives in your instincts, in your fear of missing something, in your deep need to not be alone. And manipulators know this. They use it like a lever, small, silent, but powerful, not to yell at you, not to confront you, just to suggest, softly, everyone else is doing it. Think about how this plays out online. You scroll past a post with thousands of likes. You stop. You might like it too. You might not even agree with it. But something inside you whispers, if all these people believe it, maybe I should too. But what if those likes were fake? What if the views were bought, the reviews scripted, the followers bots? Now the suggestion isn't harmless. It's intentional. It's a performance, a carefully constructed illusion, built to shape your behavior without you knowing. You're not being persuaded. You're being herded. Let's look deeper. Social proof exploitation isn't just digital. It happens in rooms, in meetings, in relationships. Picture a group of people nodding along with an idea, not because they agree, but because the first few people nodded, and no one wants to be the one who disagrees. Silence becomes approval, doubt becomes submission, and just like that, a lie becomes reality, not because it's true, but because enough people acted like it was. It's not always sinister. Sometimes it's unconscious. People follow because it's easier. safer, familiar. But when it's done on purpose, when someone creates fake consensus to control your choices, that's when it becomes dangerous. And here's the darkest part. It often works best when you don't feel manipulated at all, because it doesn't come with red flags or alarms. It comes with numbers, likes, stars, testimonials. Everybody's doing it. All the experts agree. This is the #1 choice. No one tells you what to do. They just make it look like you're the only one who hasn't already done it. That's the trick. And it slips past your defenses, because it doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like reality, like you're just catching up with the rest of the world. But maybe you're not. Maybe you're falling into someone else's design. Let's slow down. Look at the next ad you see, the next comment section, the next influencer you follow. Ask yourself, is this real support, or is it decoration? Because fake consensus is a mask, a costume for a product, a person, an idea, and once it's on, it becomes hard to tell what's real and what's just good stagecraft. And if you're not careful, you'll clap along with the crowd, not because you believe, but because you don't want to be the one who doesn't. Think about that. The manipulation isn't loud. It's not angry. It doesn't scream for your attention. It just sits there, quiet, confident, dressed in the illusion of popularity. And that's what makes it so powerful, because when you believe you're part of a majority, you stop questioning, you relax your guard, you follow. But maybe that majority never existed. Maybe you were the first to be fooled, and then you became part of the proof. That's the final twist of this trick. Once you believe, you become the next signal, you become the next nod, the next like, the next reason someone else says yes. Not because it's right, just because they saw you do it. One illusion becomes many, and the fake becomes real, through repetition. So how do you escape? You don't need to be paranoid. You just need to be aware. Pause before you believe the numbers. Question the crowd. Don't assume that popularity equals truth. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it's a trap. And sometimes the silence of others isn't agreement. It's fear. Fear of being the only one who sees the trick. But you're not alone. The next time something feels too popular to be wrong, stop, listen, ask yourself, is this real belief or borrowed belief? And if it's borrowed, maybe it's time to give it back. Because the deepest manipulation is the one you never notice. And now, you've noticed. So stay aware, stay curious, and remember, not every crowd knows where it's going. Some are just walking in circles around an idea that no one ever truly questioned. And maybe that starts with you.
Negging. What if the compliment you just got was never really a compliment? There's a smile on their face. Their tone is light. Their words are dressed as kindness. But something in your stomach twists. Something doesn't sit right. They say you look so good for once. They say you're smarter than you act. They say they usually don't go for your type. But here we are, and you laugh. Because what else can you do? You play along. You take the words like a gift, even though they feel like a trap. The moment passes, the conversation moves on. But later, when you're alone, it hits you again, that tiny jab, that sting. You wonder why it bothered you, why it stuck, why it left a mark. That's not just a weird comment, that's negging, a compliment sharpened into a knife, a sugar-coated insult, designed to go unnoticed, until it doesn't. Negging isn't always loud, it's not full of rage or shouting, it's subtle, slippery, it slips past your guard, because it sounds like affection, but it's not meant to lift you up, it's meant to lower you just enough to change the balance of power. Let's stay here for a while. Negging doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from friends, from partners, from people who smile at you as they say it. It starts small, a nudge, a tease, a tiny scratch on the mirror of your confidence, just enough to make you check your reflection twice, just enough to make you wonder if maybe, just maybe, they're right. Because that's the trick. Negging works best when you believe it might be true. It isn't about outright cruelty. That would be too easy to spot. Negging hides behind charm, behind flirtation, behind what seems like playful banter. It's a whisper in your ear that says, "You're not quite good enough, but I'm willing to tolerate you." It doesn't shout, it murmurs. And when it hits just right, it doesn't make you angry. It makes you insecure. That's when the shift happens. You try to prove yourself. You work harder to earn their approval. You laugh more at their jokes. You lean in closer. You shrink without even noticing. You start to crave their compliments because they're rare. And when you finally get one that sounds real, it feels like gold, even if it comes wrapped in another dig. This isn't an accident. This is control. Negging is manipulation at its most deceptive. It's not about violence. It's about imbalance. It's about creating a subtle tilt, where they stand a little taller, and you stand a little smaller, and you don't even know it's happening. Some people use it to flirt, others to dominate, but the goal is always the same. Make you feel less, so they can feel more. Let's go deeper. Negging works because the human brain is wired to detect social value. We're always scanning, always judging, trying to figure out where we stand. So when someone treats you with slight disapproval wrapped in charm, your brain lights up. It wants to solve the puzzle. It wants to win them over. And in trying to do that, you give them power. They become the prize. You become the seeker. They chip away at your confidence, and you help them do it. It sounds dark, and it is, but that's why it works. Negging is designed to target the cracks you already have. It feeds off your doubts, your fears, that tiny voice that wonders if you're actually good enough. And that's what makes it dangerous, because when it's done well you don't even know it happened. You just feel different, less sure, a little off-center, a little more eager to please. That's when they've won. Let your mind wander now. Try to remember the last time someone made you feel smaller, but in a way that was hard to call out. Did they say you were cute when you're not overthinking? Did they tell you you'd be pretty if you smiled more? Did they mention they usually go for someone a little more serious, but you're fun too? Each one of those is a cut, carefully disguised as kindness. Not deep, not dramatic, but enough to bleed a little. And the more of them you collect, the more you start to change. Not all at once, but quietly, gradually. That's what negging does. It wears down the edges of your self-esteem until you barely remember what it felt like to stand up straight. It's not about insults. It's about confusion. Not about anger, but uncertainty. You start to ask, are they teasing? Or do they mean it? Am I too sensitive? Maybe I should be more grateful they're paying attention to me at all. And just like that, you're inside the trap, because the moment you question yourself, they don't have to. You start editing your behavior, dimming your light, making yourself smaller so you can fit inside their approval. And the worst part, they'll say they were joking, that you're overreacting, that you need to lighten up, but inside you feel it. Negging leaves fingerprints. It leaves questions in places that used to feel like certainty. It makes you second-guess your own worth, not in a crash, but in a slow, steady fade. And once you're there, they have you. So how do you spot it? You listen not just to their words but to how those words make you feel. If a compliment makes you shrink instead of shine, it's not a compliment. If someone says something nice that stays with you for all the wrong reasons, look again. If it lingers like a bruise, it wasn't affection, it was control. And the only real defense is awareness, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start to hear the cracks behind their charm. You start to notice how often they compliment you with a smirk, or how they praise you while planting doubt. And when you see it, you get to choose to step back, to call it out, to protect the parts of you that they're trying to dim. Because negging only works in the shadows. It needs you to believe that it's harmless, that it's just teasing, that you're imagining things, but you're not. You feel it, and your feelings are valid. So the next time someone tells you you're pretty good for someone like you, smile if you want, laugh if you feel like it. But remember, you don't have to earn their approval by becoming smaller. You were never too much. They were just too uncomfortable with your light, and that maybe more than anything is the truth they can't stand. Negging isn't clever. It's not edgy. It's fear, dressed as flirtation. It's insecurity, wearing a smile. But you don't need to shrink for anyone. Not now, not ever.
Semantic manipulation. What if words aren't what they seem? The first trick doesn't shout. It doesn't even whisper. It just slips in, quietly, cleanly, like a shadow changing shape beneath a street lamp. A word gets used. A sentence sounds normal, and suddenly, the meaning of everything starts to bend. You hear someone say something you've heard before, but it lands differently. It's not that the words are wrong, it's that they've been tilted, just slightly, just enough to make you doubt your own understanding. Just semantic manipulation, not a scream, not a lie, just a slow redrawing of the map, until you're lost, even while standing exactly where you started. It begins small. Someone says, "I didn't lie, I just didn't tell you," and that sounds almost reasonable. Almost, but look closer. The truth hasn't changed, just the label. The action is the same, but the word used to describe it has been swapped, downgraded, diluted. Now it's not deception anymore, it's just omission. This trick works because your brain trusts language. It has to. Words are the handles we use to carry meaning, and when someone changes the handle, the object inside starts to feel different, even if it's exactly the same. Think of it like this. If you call poison vitamin dust, does it stop being poison? No. But if you repeat it enough, people might forget to check the bottle. That's the danger of twisted definitions. They don't erase the truth. They cover it with a prettier coat of paint. Words are powerful, not because of their sound, but because of the stories we wrap around them. Change the story, and you change how people feel. Say enhanced interrogation instead of torture. Say collateral damage instead of civilian deaths. Say discipline instead of abuse. And suddenly, the horror fades a little. The sting dulls. The outrage gets quieter. Semantic manipulation works best when no one's watching closely. When we're too tired, too trusting, too distracted to notice the shift. It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's just lazy. People say literally when they mean figuratively. They say love when they mean want. They say sorry when they really mean please stop being mad. But when it's used intentionally, when someone twists a word on purpose to dodge blame, or twist a knife, that's when the trick becomes dark. The most effective manipulators don't argue facts, they argue definitions. They don't say, "I didn't do that." They say, "That's not what doing that means." It sounds smart, technical, safe, but it's a trap. Imagine you're in a relationship. You say, "You hurt me," and they say, "That wasn't hurt, that was honesty." Now the meaning of hurt has been rewritten without your permission, and now you're not allowed to feel the way you feel. Words should connect, but in manipulation, they become walls. Sometimes, people twist definitions to gain the upper hand. They redefine respect as obedience, loyalty as silence, love as endurance, and suddenly, standing up for yourself feels like betrayal, because the words have changed, but you haven't. Here's the quiet genius of this trick. It doesn't just change how others see the world, it changes how you do. It makes you question your gut, your instincts, your values. You start to wonder, am I overreacting? Am I misunderstanding? But you're not. You're just stuck in a game where the rules keep shifting, and the scoreboard is written in invisible ink. It can happen in relationships, in politics, at work, even in your own thoughts. Ever told yourself, it's not procrastination, it's strategic resting? That's a little twist, a little semantic sleight of hand. It's not always bad. Sometimes we need softer language to survive. We say passed away instead of died,
because it hurts less. We say laid off instead of fired because it leaves a little dignity intact. But when the goal is control, when the twist is meant to trap you or silence you, that's when it turns dark. That's when words become weapons. Think about it. A single word can change how history is remembered. Whether someone's a freedom fighter or a terrorist often depends more on perspective than on behavior. The actions may be identical, but the label changes the legacy. Semantic manipulation isn't always dramatic. Often it's a slow erosion. A term gets used a few times in a new way. Then it catches on. Then it becomes the new normal. And by the time anyone notices, the old meaning is gone. You can't fight it by yelling louder. You fight it by staying awake. By asking, what do you mean by that? Not to argue, but to understand. Because once you understand the frame, you can see the trick. Let's pause for a second. Think back to a time someone said something that didn't feel right. You couldn't explain why, just that their words didn't match the moment. Maybe they said, "Relax, I was just joking," after saying something cruel. Maybe they said, "I never promised," after strongly implying they would. That tension you felt, that unease, that was your brain catching the twist before your mouth found the words to name it. Your intuition noticed the shift in the semantic ground. It's like standing on a rug that moves an inch while you're standing still. You didn't move. The meaning did. So what can we do? We listen closely. We ask questions, even when they feel awkward. We slow down when something feels slippery. We define things clearly, out loud, together. Because clarity is a kind of armor. Language is not just how we communicate. It's how we think, how we structure reality. So when someone manipulates words, they're not just changing a conversation, they're changing what's real. Maybe the darkest part of this trick is that it's so hard to spot, so easy to deny, so comfortable to accept, because once you adopt the twisted meaning, you don't just hear it. You start to believe it. You start to repeat it. You start to spread it. And that's how the manipulation grows. Not through force, but through quiet agreement, through repetition, through habit, through silence. So the next time you hear someone redefining something mid-sentence, or moving the goalposts of a word you thought you understood, pause. Listen. Ask, because maybe, just maybe, you've caught the game in progress. And now that you see the cards, you don't have to play along. You don't have to accept the new meaning. You can name the twist. You can say that word doesn't mean what you're saying it means. And that one sentence, that's the undoing of the trick. Because truth doesn't need clever wording. Truth just needs to be seen. So be the one who sees. Not to win. Not to fight. Just to stay clear. To stay awake. To stay free. And isn't that kind of powerful?
False flattery. What if every compliment wasn't real? The first charm, a kind word that feels just a little too sweet. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It slides in, smooth and light, like a feather brushing across your pride. Someone looks you in the eyes and says something nice. Maybe it's about your work, or your clothes, or the way you handled something earlier, and at first it feels good, warm, even, like sunshine you didn't expect. But then something shifts, just a flicker, a tiny pause, because something about the way they said it didn't sit right. That's false flattery, the softest blade in the manipulator's toolkit, a smile that cuts, a hand that reaches out, not to lift you up, but to pull you closer, for control. It doesn't always come from a stranger. Sometimes it comes from a friend, a co-worker, a lover, someone who knows just how to wrap their words in golden ribbon, not because they admire you, but because they need something. And you don't see it right away. Because false flattery is rarely loud. It doesn't knock down doors. It whispers through them. It starts as praise,
but praise with a purpose, not to lift, but to lead, to nudge, to influence, to soften your defenses just enough so that the real work of manipulation can begin. And here's the trick. It feels good, even when it's fake. That's why it works. That's why it's dangerous. Our brains are wired to respond to praise. A kind word lights up our reward centers like a match to dry grass. We lean in. We trust more. We want to please those who see the good in us, even when that good is a carefully chosen illusion. Imagine someone tells you you're brilliant, right after you voice an idea they were already planning to use, or that you're so thoughtful, right before they ask you to cover their shift, or keep their secret, or lend them something you can't afford to give. The compliment is the hook, the request is the line, and you're the fish, still smiling as you're reeled in. But false flattery isn't always about getting something big. Sometimes it's just about positioning, power, making sure they feel one step above you, even while pretending to put you on a pedestal. You're not like other people, they might say. You're so smart, so mature, and just like that, you're no longer an equal. You're chosen, set apart, a favorite. But favorites can be controlled, because once someone gives you that special title, once they've crafted that image of you in their mind, you feel pressure to keep it, to live up to it, even when it costs you, especially when it costs you. That's the heart of it. False flattery doesn't build you up. It builds a box around you, a soft gold-lined cage, where your actions serve someone else's story. The worst part, it doesn't feel like control. It feels like connection. But real connection doesn't come with strings. It doesn't flatter to manipulate. It recognizes you, not just for what you do, or how you look, or what you give, but for who you actually are. False flattery skips that part. It's not about you. It's about them, their agenda, their gain. And the easiest path to that gain is often paved with compliments. Still, not all praise is manipulation. Not every nice word hides a hook. But here's a clue. Real compliments feel grounded. They land softly, then leave. They don't linger with expectations. They don't shift the balance of the room. Fake ones do. Fake ones stick to you. They weigh a little more. They leave a feeling you can't name. Something just slightly off, like wearing someone else's coat. Because often, the flattery is too much, too fast, too soon. You're a genius, someone says, after hearing you speak once. You're the only one I can trust, says the person who barely knows you. You always understand me better than anyone. They claim just before they tell you something no one else will verify. That's the trick. Flattery turns into pressure, and pressure turns into control. You find yourself saying yes more often, letting small things slide, ignoring your gut, because, well, they said you were amazing, and people who admire you can't be using you, right? But think about it. Why would someone need to make you feel that good? That fast? Sometimes, it's because they're building a bridge, not between you and them, but between your trust and their benefit. The strategy works especially well on those who crave approval, people who weren't told they were good enough, people who learned that love is something you earn. To them, flattery feels like home, but sometimes, it's a trap disguised as kindness. And here's the hardest part. Even when you realize it's false, you might still want it, still crave the warm light it throws, even if the source is artificial. But here's a truth you can carry with you. Real confidence doesn't need constant praise, and real love doesn't flatter to control. When someone gives you a compliment, ask yourself, what came before it? What follows after? Is it just kindness? Or is it currency? Because false flattery is always a transaction, a trade masked as a gift. And the best way to protect yourself is to slow down, pause, notice, feel. Does the compliment make you feel empowered or indebted? Does it leave you free or suddenly obligated? And if the answer is the latter, step back just a little, enough to breathe, enough to listen to that quiet voice inside that says, "This doesn't feel right," because that voice, that's your compass. And false flattery, it tries to smother it. But your instincts know, your body knows, that tiny chill, that subtle shift, that small twist in your stomach. When something sounds too good to be true, it's not paranoia, it's wisdom. Let it speak, because in a world full of sweet words with sharp edges, one of the bravest things you can do is trust your own silence. And when the flattery fades, when the charm runs out and the smiles thin, you'll be left standing in your own truth, unhooked, unbent, unmoved, no longer led by empty praise, no longer softened by compliments that never meant to love you, because you know better now, and that is power.
Double binds. What if every choice you make is the wrong one? It starts quietly. You're having a simple conversation, or maybe just trying to help someone. Nothing heavy, nothing dramatic. But then the ground shifts beneath your feet, just slightly. A few words, a look, and suddenly, no matter what you do, it feels like you're at fault. You try to speak carefully, you try to do the right thing, but each path leads to the same place. Guilt. That's a double bind, not a trap made of ropes or chains, but of language, expectations, invisible rules that only appear after you've already broken them. It feels like you're being punished for playing a game you didn't know you were in. A double bind works by giving you two or more choices, but here's the twist. Every option leads to failure, and the worst part, you can't escape without making it worse. Say no, and you're selfish. Say yes, and you're weak. Stay silent, and you're cold. Speak up, and you're overreacting. It's like a maze where every exit is also an entrance to blame. And the longer you're stuck in it, the more you start to question your own judgment, your own goodness, your own reality. And that's the point. Double binds aren't just confusing, they're disorienting. They mess with your sense of logic. They twist your moral compass. And slowly, they start to pull you apart from the inside. Let's pause for a moment. Think back. Have you ever been in a situation where someone said, "Be honest with me," and then got angry when you were? Or when someone asked for space, and then accused you of not caring when you gave it to them? And that's a double bind. It's not just mixed signals. It's not miscommunication. It's strategic confusion. A kind of manipulation that feels like a test you were never meant to pass. And when used deliberately, it's one of the darkest tools someone can wield, because it wears you down, not by yelling, not by threats, but by contradiction, tiny, subtle contradictions that build up over time, until you start to believe that no matter what you do, you're wrong. To imagine a parent saying, "Stand up for yourself, don't let people walk all over you," but the moment you push back against them, they say, "How dare you speak to me like that?" That's not parenting, that's control through confusion. And the more it happens, the less you trust your own instincts. You stop asserting yourself, not because you're passive, but because you've learned that speaking up only brings more pain. You learn to doubt yourself, to second-guess every decision. You start asking questions like, am I being too sensitive? Was I wrong to say that? Should I have handled that differently? Until eventually, you just stop asking, because the guilt is too loud. Double binds don't just manipulate your behavior, they change your internal dialogue. They make you the enforcer of your own silence. And here's the really dark part. People who use double binds
often make you believe you're the one at fault. They never shout. They rarely accuse. Instead they sigh. They look disappointed. They say things like, "I just expected more from you. I can't believe you'd say that. After everything I've done, I thought you understood me." Words that seem harmless, but land like lead in your chest. And over time, they teach you that love is conditional, that your value depends on pleasing someone else, and that your feelings, your boundaries, your needs are always negotiable. That's how it works. Double binds teach you to betray yourself, just to avoid upsetting someone else. And that's why they're so powerful, because when used over and over, they don't just change how you act, they change who you are. But here's the truth. This kind of manipulation only works when you don't see it. It depends on your confusion, your empathy, your fear of being the bad one. So let's turn the lights on. Let's name the trap. Let's step back far enough to see the pattern for what it is. A deliberate tangle of expectations designed to keep you stuck. Because once you see it, you can start to untie it, slowly, carefully, by asking questions like, why do I feel guilty no matter what I do? Am I being judged for contradicting instructions? Do I feel punished for making a reasonable choice? These questions don't fix everything, but they help you see clearly. They remind you that you're not crazy, that your confusion is not a flaw in your logic. It's a signal, a flare from your intuition that something is off, and maybe once you spot it, you can start to step out of it. Not always quickly, not without setbacks, but eventually, you'll learn to walk away from the guilt that doesn't belong to you. Because here's the secret. People who use double binds rely on your kindness, your willingness to explain, to apologize, to make things better. But kindness is not compliance, empathy is not obedience, and love should never feel like a trap. So the next time you feel the walls closing in, the next time every option feels wrong, pause, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, whose rules am I following? Because you don't owe anyone a version of yourself that constantly feels guilty. You don't need to twist into knots to avoid disappointment. You don't need to pass every emotional test someone throws your way. You are not here to be cornered. You are not here to be controlled. And guilt is not proof of wrongdoing. Sometimes it's just a shadow cast by someone else's manipulation. So when it shows up, uninvited, unexplained, unfair, don't panic. Observe it, trace it back, and if you find that it leads to a choice you were never meant to win, now you know. You've seen the double bind, and once you've seen it, you can choose something else. Not the illusion of choice, but real choice. The choice to walk away from the game entirely, to trust your own voice again, to reclaim your ability to say yes, to say no, to say nothing at all, without apology. That's where freedom lives, not in the absence of guilt, but in the presence of clarity. And isn't that kind of powerful?
Deliberate vagueness. What if someone could control you without ever lying? There's no raised voice, no threat, no obvious manipulation, just words, gentle, slippery words, sentences that sound like answers but aren't, promises that feel real, but never actually say anything at all. You ask a question, they smile, they talk, and somehow you still don't know what they meant. That's deliberate vagueness, a kind of manipulation that hides in plain sight, not by saying the wrong thing, but by saying nothing clearly at all. Let's take a step into the fog. You see, not all manipulation is loud or dramatic. Some of the most powerful tactics are soft, quiet, subtle enough that you don't realize you're being steered until you've already agreed, until you've already said yes to something you didn't understand. Deliberate vagueness is one of those tactics, a way of speaking without truly saying, a way of answering without ever committing, a tool that keeps the other person confused, but just enough to keep listening. It works because the human brain wants clarity. We search for meaning, so when someone speaks vaguely,
Our mind fills in the blanks. We try to make sense of it, and that's where the trap is laid, because if they didn't say it clearly, they can always say, "Oh, that's not what I meant. You thought they promised something." No, they only implied it. You assumed they'd take responsibility. No, they hinted at it, but left the door open. It's like a magician waving one hand, while the other slips the coin out of view. Only in this case, the coin is the truth, and it's already gone. So why would someone use this? It's simple, because being vague means never having to be wrong, never having to admit, never having to be held to anything. A vague answer can protect someone's ego, it can protect their image, and most of all, it protects their control, because as long as you're confused, they're in charge. Let's walk through a moment. Imagine you're asking your partner if they're seeing someone else. They don't say no, they don't say yes, they say, "You know, I've been under a lot of stress." You always jump to conclusions when things are hard. Did you catch that? No answer, just a redirection. They didn't lie, but they didn't tell the truth either. They used your own uncertainty against you. They slipped away, wrapped in a cloud of words that sound honest, but lead nowhere. And the more you press, the more they twist. "I already told you how I feel." You're overanalyzing again. Let's not get caught up in semantics. All of these are shields, soft, foggy shields, and the more you try to pin them down, the more exhausted you feel, until eventually, you stop asking. And that's the goal, to get you to stop, because the real weapon in deliberate vagueness isn't confusion, it's fatigue. If they can keep you unsure long enough, you'll wear yourself out. You'll stop seeking clarity, and you'll start accepting implication instead of truth. Think about how often this happens in everyday life, in relationships, at work, in politics, even within ourselves. How many times have you said, "I'm fine," when you weren't? How often do leaders say change is coming, without saying what that change is? We're surrounded by language that avoids clarity, because clarity means accountability, and for someone who wants to stay in power, emotional, social or professional, that's dangerous. Deliberate vagueness is especially effective when there's an imbalance of power. A boss speaking to an employee, a parent to a child, a manipulative partner to someone they're trying to control. It creates a loop. You ask for understanding, they give you a cloud. You question the cloud, they act like you're being too sensitive, and soon you're the problem, not them. The vagueness becomes a mirror. It reflects your confusion back at you, as if it was your fault. You start doubting your memory, your judgment, even your right to ask for a straight answer. That's when it gets dark, because now, the manipulator doesn't even have to do much. They've planted a seed, and you're watering it with every second guess, every maybe I misunderstood, every I don't want to overreact. So what do? How do you fight back against fog? You demand light. The key to seeing through deliberate vagueness is to slow down and name it. Say it out loud. Ask for specifics. Don't settle for hints. Don't fill in the blanks for them. If someone says, "You know how I feel," ask, "No, I don't. Can you tell me clearly?" If they say, "Things are complicated," say, "I'm listening." Explain it simply. If they say, "You always do this," respond with, "What exactly am I doing?" You don't have to be aggressive, just clear, because clarity is a boundary, and people who rely on vagueness don't like boundaries. It shines a light on the shadows they hide in. It forces them to choose, be honest, or stay silent. Either way, you win, because once you see the trick, it doesn't work anymore. You've pulled the curtain back, you've watched the magician's hands, and now, the illusion is gone. But here's the thing, not all vagueness is evil. Sometimes we're vague because we're scared, because we don't know what we want, or we're afraid to hurt someone. Sometimes we're not trying to manipulate, we're just trying to protect. But that's not what this is about. This is about those who use it intentionally, those who hide behind it, those who use your desire for clarity as a weapon against you. That's deliberate vagueness, the gentle knife, the invisible leash. And once you feel it, once you recognize its rhythm, you'll see it every way. So the next time someone answers your question with fog, pause. Don't get pulled into the mist. Stand still, ask again, and if they still can't give you clarity, maybe that's your answer. Not every whisper deserves your trust. Not every smile is honest, and not every silence is harmless. Some are tools, some are traps, and some are the darkest kind of manipulation.
Appeal to emotion. What if, without even noticing, your emotions were picked up, twisted, and used against you? It doesn't start with a lie or a threat. It starts with a feeling, a carefully placed sigh, a tremble in the voice, a well-timed tear. And before you even realize it, your decisions aren't coming from logic anymore. They're coming from guilt, from sympathy, from fear. That's the trick. That's the emotional hook. That's appeal to emotion. It doesn't shout. It whispers, not in your ears, but in your heart. And when it speaks, it doesn't ask, "What do you think?" It asks, "How do you feel?" And feelings, well, they're messy. They don't follow rules. They don't care about facts, or fairness, or logic. They move like water, fast, unpredictable, and hard to hold. And that's exactly what makes them so easy to manipulate. Let's slow down here. You're in a conversation. It seems harmless at first. Maybe you're talking about a choice, a disagreement, a simple yes or no, but suddenly, things shift. Facts fall away. The other person's voice grows heavy with sadness. They bring up the past, or pain, or things you had nothing to do with, but now somehow feel responsible for. You want to help. You want to be kind. You want to be the good one. So, you agree. You give in. Not because the logic changed, but because your heart did. And just like that, your emotions were used as a steering wheel, gently, silently, effectively. That's the dark power of emotional appeal. It's not always bad. Sometimes, emotions connect us, move us, help us see the world more fully. But in the wrong hands, emotions stop being bridges and become traps. Think of it like this. You're standing in a room full of buttons. Some light up, some buzz, some play music. But there's one button, big red, glowing, that says feel. Most people won't press it, but manipulators, they do it for you, over and over. They know what it triggers, and they've learned exactly when to press it, to get what they want. A child, looking up with wide eyes, says, "But I thought you loved me." A boss says, "After everything I've done for you." A partner whispers, "If you leave, I don't know what I'll do." And suddenly, you're not choosing anymore. You're reacting to pain, to pressure, to that lump in your throat that says, "I can't be the reason someone hurts." But what if that's the plan? What if the hurt was placed there on purpose? That's what makes this trick so dangerous. It hides inside care. It wears a mask of vulnerability. It pretends to be helpless, when in fact, it's pulling the strings. Appeal to emotion doesn't care if the facts are against it. It doesn't argue with data. It doesn't need evidence. It just makes you feel, and lets that feeling do the work. Let's go deeper. Imagine you're on a jury. The evidence is clear, but then someone stands up and tells a heartbreaking story, the kind that grabs your chest and won't let go. It's not related. It's not proof, but suddenly, you're leaning toward them, not because they're right, but because they hurt, and you want the hurting to stop. That's not logic. That's leverage. Now picture a politician. Instead of explaining their policies, they tell you about the dangers, the threats, the people to fear. They paint images of chaos, of harm, of others who want to take what's yours, and slowly, fear replaces reason. They didn't need to tell the truth. They only needed to press that red button, feel. You see, fear doesn't check the math. Sadness doesn't read the fine print.
Anger doesn't ask for both sides of the story. These emotions move first and ask questions later, if ever, and that's why this tactic works over and over, because people will often do anything to avoid emotional discomfort, even if it means choosing the wrong thing, even if it means surrendering their truth. So what do? Do we stop feeling, turn cold, build walls so high that no sadness, no fear, no plea for help ever touches us again? No, that's not the answer. The answer is awareness. It's recognizing the moment when emotion shows up, not to connect, but to control. It's feeling that tug and asking, is this real, or is it rehearsed? It's stepping back when someone cries during a debate, not to be cruel, but to be clear. What are they asking? Why now? Is this pain or performance? You're not heartless for asking, you're human for noticing, because manipulators thrive in silence, in reaction, in moments where you're too kind to call it out, too caring to say no. But awareness, that breaks the spell. So next time someone says, "You're breaking my heart," when all you did was disagree, pause. Next time a story is told just before a request, especially if it's meant to make you feel guilty, pause. Emotions are not bad, they are not the enemy, but they are not always the guide, not when someone's steering them for you. Appeal to emotion works best when you don't see it, when it slides beneath your logic and anchors itself in your chest. But once you spot it, once you call it what it is, it loses power. Like a magician whose trick has been revealed, it still works on some, but not on you. Not anymore, because now you see the wires, you see the hand moving the cards, you feel the tug, but you don't move with it. You breathe, you think, you decide, and that's freedom. Maybe it's not dramatic, maybe it's not loud, but it's real. And in a world full of voices trying to twist your emotions into tools, that kind of clarity, that's power. So the next time you feel the pull, the guilt, the fear, the sadness that seems just a little too perfectly timed, don't panic, just notice. And in that moment of noticing, remind yourself, feelings matter, but truth matters more. You are not cold for protecting your boundaries. You are not cruel for asking for clarity. You are not broken for wanting both empathy and honesty. You are awake, and that's the one thing manipulation fears the most, because when you see it, you can stop it, and when you stop it, you reclaim the one thing no one should ever take from you: your choice, your voice, your freedom to feel, but not be ruled by feeling. And maybe that's not just powerful, maybe that's the beginning of something better.
Reframing. What if the worst things people do don't feel like the worst? What if the most dangerous tricks don't look like tricks at all? It starts quietly. Maybe someone says something to you, something small, they hurt you, maybe, or they lie, or they cross a line you didn't even know was there, but instead of admitting it, they say, "I did it for you," or "You're too sensitive," or "That's just how I show love." And for a second you pause, not because it makes sense, but because it's confusing. That's reframing, changing the frame around a picture, so the picture doesn't look as dark, changing the words around a wound, so the wound looks like care. It's not always loud, not always violent. Sometimes it wears a smile, sometimes it sounds reasonable, sometimes the worst kind of manipulation doesn't scream, it whispers, and those whispers can stay with you for a long time. Let's stay here for a while, not to judge, not to blame, just to observe. Let's look closely at the edges of language, the small turns of phrase, the tone, the rhythm, because words have gravity, and some words used the wrong way can pull you down without you even noticing. Let's begin with a simple idea. It's not control, it's protection. You've probably heard that one before. A parent who tracks every step you take, a partner who checks your messages, a boss who micromanages every breath. They don't say they're trying to control you, they say they care. They say they're just keeping you safe, and maybe they believe that, but the truth gets buried.
beneath all the nice-sounding words, control dressed up as concern. That's reframing. Now picture this. Someone crosses a boundary. Maybe they yell, maybe they cheat, and when you confront them, they say, "It made me stronger. I thought you could handle it." They shift the meaning. They make it sound like it was a gift, as if pain is proof of love, as if hurting you was somehow helping you. It's not just a lie, it's a reshaping of reality, one where they're still the hero. They don't have to be the villain, because they've rewritten the story. Reframing isn't just about avoiding blame, it's about rebuilding the truth, piece by piece, until even you don't recognize what really happened. Think of language like a lens. Some people use it to bring things into focus, others use it to blur the truth. They'll say, "I didn't raise my voice. I was just passionate." Or it's not lying. It's just bending the truth. Little edits, tiny swaps, enough to make the wrong thing feel okay. And over time those edits change you, because you start to second-guess yourself. You start to wonder if you were overreacting. You start to feel guilty for setting boundaries. You start to think they're right. And maybe you're the problem. That's the real power of reframing. It makes you doubt your own eyes. It makes you rewrite your own memory. You begin to tell their version of the story, until it becomes your version. That's how manipulation hides, not in big bold lies, but in the subtle tweaks, the clever spin, the soft polished edge of a weapon that doesn't look like a weapon at all. Let your thoughts drift for a moment, back to a time when someone hurt you, and then made it sound like they were the victim. Do you remember the feeling? That tug in your chest, that quiet voice in your mind saying, "Wait, something's off," but you didn't have the words for it, because they had already taken the words and twisted them. That's reframing. It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's unconscious. People reframe their actions to protect their ego, to avoid shame, to keep the illusion of being good. But whether it's done with intent or not, the damage is the same, because once reality has been reshaped, you lose your footing. You don't know what's real anymore. And when that happens, you stop trusting yourself. You start to need them to tell you what's true. And that's the trap. That's how they keep control. Not just over the story, but over you. Let's breathe here for a second, because this isn't about fear. It's about clarity. Reframing is powerful. But once you learn to spot it, you can pull the curtain back. Start with the language. Listen closely when someone justifies harm with pretty words, when pain is packaged as growth, when betrayal is spun into honesty, when control is coated in love. Ask yourself who benefits from this version of the story, who gets to feel good, and who gets hurt, but doesn't get to say they were hurt. Manipulators don't erase what happened, they just change how it feels. They repaint the memory. They turn a slap into a wake-up call. They turn neglect into tough love. They turn humiliation into just a joke. And if you're not careful, you'll start to retell it that way too. So here's the truth. Pain is still pain, even if it comes with a smile. Love should never require you to shrink, and no one, no matter how kind their tone, gets to redefine your reality. You have a right to your own story, your own words, your own truth. So the next time someone says, "I did it because I care," pause, look past the frame, and ask what the picture really shows. Because not all kindness is real, not all love is safe, and not all truth comes in soft tones. Sometimes the hardest manipulation to see is the one that feels the nicest. But now, you've seen it, you know the shape of it, you know the sound, you've named it, and once you name it, it can't hide as easily anymore. That's the first light in the dark. That's the first unframing. That's the beginning of your clarity, and we're just getting started.
Strawman argument. What if the person you're arguing with was never actually arguing with you? The conversation starts off simple. Two people, one idea. Maybe it's a disagreement over something small, a belief, a preference, a choice. Nothing explosive, just a difference in view. And then,
Suddenly, something changes. You say one thing, just one, carefully chosen, clear in your mind. But when they respond, it's to something else, something twisted, something you didn't even say. You blink, you feel it right away, the shift, because now you're defending a position you never had. That's not your idea. That's not your argument, but somehow, it's become the battleground. Welcome to the straw man, not a figure made of hay and sticks, standing alone in a field, but something much trickier, something far more subtle. This straw man is built from your own words, bent, pulled apart, reshaped into a version that's easier to attack, a version that doesn't quite belong to you anymore. And once it's standing, once the false version of your argument is propped up, watch what happens next. They tear it down, quickly, publicly, confidently, and as the straw falls, it looks like they've defeated your idea, but they haven't, not really, because they weren't arguing with you. They were arguing with something they invented, something that only resembles your point, but never truly was. This is one of the oldest tricks in manipulation. It doesn't shout, it doesn't threaten, it pretends to listen, then quietly rewrites the script. It's like trying to explain your favorite book to someone, only to have them summarize it back to you in one sentence. And not just any sentence, but one that gets the plot wrong, misses the point, warps the theme, and then they criticize that version. You want to say, that's not what I meant, but by then the damage is already done. The audience, if there is one, starts to question you, starts to doubt, starts to think maybe their idea was flawed, even though it wasn't. Not the real idea, just the fake one, the straw version. The straw man doesn't argue with you to understand you, it argues to win, and it wins by replacing complexity with something easier to knock down, something simplified, distorted, thin, just like straw. Maybe you've seen it happen before, online, in debates, even in close relationships. You say, I think we should spend more on mental health programs, and someone fires back, oh, so you want to defund everything else? You want chaos in the streets? You pause, confused. That's not what I said at all. But the argument has already moved forward, based on their version, not yours. That's how it spreads, quietly, like a fog. It creeps into discussions, masks the real issue, and turns curiosity into combat. It doesn't seek truth, it seeks advantage. It builds a dummy out of your words, then sets it on fire. And the worst part, many people don't even know they're doing it. Sometimes it's on purpose, a calculated move, but sometimes it's just the mind taking a shortcut, avoiding the discomfort of deeper thought, because listening deeply is hard, arguing honestly is slow, and it's so much easier to refute a weak version of someone's idea than to sit with the strong one. So how do you spot it? It usually starts with exaggeration. You say, I'm concerned about how fast we're using natural resources, and they say, so you want us to live in caves again? You say, I think schools need to change the way they grade students. They say, oh, so now hard work means nothing. It's never a direct reflection. It's always a caricature, a blown-up version, distorted outline, an idea pulled just far enough from yours that it's easier to punch, but close enough that it still looks like you, like a mask that almost fits, but not quite. The straw man argument doesn't just twist your ideas, it tries to trap you. It forces you to spend all your energy defending a position you never took in the first place. You end up explaining yourself again and again, clarifying, reframing, trying to pull the conversation back to where it started. And sometimes you can't, because once the straw man has taken your place, it's hard to get back into your own argument. So what do? You pause, you get still, you name what's happening. You say, that's not what I said. Simple, calm, clear. You don't shout, you don't panic, you don't let the fake version pull you off your ground. You return to your original point. Repeat it if you have to. Make it simple, gentle, honest, because clarity is power, and real arguments, true conversations need that clarity to breathe. Not every disagreement needs to be a battle. Not every debate needs a winner. And if someone is building straw versions of your thoughts just to win, maybe the conversation isn't about understanding at all. Maybe it never was. That's the danger of the straw man. It doesn't just misrepresent an argument. It rewrites the rules of dialogue. It replaces curiosity with control, and it makes people feel unheard, misunderstood, misjudged. Over time, that can break more than just a conversation. It can break trust, break connection, break the fragile bridge between two minds, trying to meet in the middle. Because when someone burns the straw, it's easy to forget what was real in the first place. So the next time you feel it happening, that strange shift, that moment where your words are being bent into something unrecognizable, pause. Don't chase the straw man. Don't fall into the trap. Stay with your truth. Stay with your meaning. Speak it again, slowly, if you have to, because your voice is not made of straw. It's not hollow. It's not flammable. It's real, and real ideas deserve better than to be turned into something else, just to be torn down. They deserve light. They deserve space. They deserve to be heard as they are, not as someone wants them to be, even if that means standing quietly while someone fights a version of you that never existed. Let them, because you know the difference, and that sometimes is enough.
False equivalence. What if the truth could be bent just a little until it still looked like truth, but wasn't? It starts with a sentence. Small, harmless, maybe. A comparison that sounds right, but feels off. You hear someone say, well, both sides are bad, or this is no different than that, and your mind nods before your heart catches up. There's a subtle dissonance, a whisper in your gut that says, wait, something's not quite equal here. But the words move fast, the logic skips over nuance, and suddenly you're left staring at two very different things being treated like they're the same. That's false equivalence. It doesn't shout. It doesn't warn you. It sneaks in quietly, through headlines, arguments, social media, conversations at dinner. It wears the costume of fairness. It pretends to be balance, but underneath, it's something else entirely. Let's slow it down. Imagine two weights on a scale. One is heavy, dense with context, history, pain. The other is light, maybe just inconvenient or uncomfortable. False equivalence looks at those two weights and says, same thing, but they're not. And deep down, you know they're not. Still, when the words are smooth enough, the surface logic convincing enough, we go along, because it feels neat, balanced, easier. Your mind likes shortcuts, patterns, symmetry, and false equivalence gives you that, in a tidy little package that avoids hard questions. Think about it. When someone says telling a lie is just as bad as stealing, what they're doing isn't pointing out morality. They're flattening the terrain, collapsing the hill into a plain. But lying to spare feelings and stealing to harm someone aren't the same. Not in intent, not in impact, not in truth. And yet, the illusion works, because we want it to. False equivalence gives us a way out of complexity, out of nuance, out of responsibility. It allows someone to defend the indefensible by dragging something else down beside it. Oh, but what about when you did that? Well, they were just as wrong. This isn't any worse than that thing over there. It's not defense, it's distraction. And once you see it, you start to notice how often it's used, not just by individuals but by systems. In politics, in media, in arguments with people who don't want to look inward. It's a tool of misdirection, a magician's sleight of hand. While you're busy comparing, you forget to question whether the comparison even makes sense. Let's sit with that for a moment. Not rush past it, not try to fix it. Just feel how strange that logic can be when two entirely different actions, motives, or outcomes are stapled together to create a fake sense of balance. It's like comparing a paper cut to a broken bone and saying pain is pain.
Technically, maybe, but meaningfully, no. That flattening of experience is dangerous. It erases harm. It excuses behavior. It muddies waters that should stay clear. False equivalence isn't just lazy thinking. Sometimes it's calculated, used by people who know the two things aren't the same, but want you to believe they are. Because if they can convince you that both sides are equally flawed, you'll stop looking for the truth. And that's the point. Confusion benefits control. When everything is the same, nothing stands out, nothing feels urgent, nothing seems worth fighting for. You become numb, and the more you hear it, the more you internalize it. You start to question your own perception. You start to wonder if maybe you are being too sensitive, too critical, too one-sided. You start to silence yourself, but you don't have to. You can step back, breathe, remember that not all things are equal, and pretending they are is not wisdom. It's erasure. There's a difference between fairness and false symmetry, between balance and denial, between objectivity and avoidance. Imagine walking through a forest after rain. Some paths are dry, others are flooded. To say they're all just trails ignores the fact that one will soak your feet and the other won't. That's the danger of false equivalence. It treats everything like it's the same. When it's not, it demands that you ignore scale, ignore weight, ignore truth. But truth isn't always symmetrical, and that's okay. It doesn't make you unfair to say, this matters more. It doesn't make you biased to say these two things cannot be compared. It makes you awake, and awake people are harder to fool. So the next time you hear someone say, well, they both did wrong, pause, ask yourself, are the actions the same? Are the impacts equal? Are the intentions aligned? Or is this just another trick, another balancing act, where one side is built of paper and the other of stone? False equivalence thrives on your silence, but you don't have to play along. You can see the scale, you can notice the tilt, you can speak the imbalance, not with anger, but with clarity, with truth. Because truth doesn't always come in pairs. It's not always found in the middle. Sometimes it's lopsided. Sometimes it's heavy. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, but it's real. And when you stop chasing fairness at the expense of truth, something happens. Your vision sharpens, your voice steadies, and you begin to spot the tricks, the subtle lies dressed up as logic. You start to feel when something's off, even if you can't explain why just yet. That's okay. Stay with that feeling. Let it guide you. Let it grow. Because in a world full of quick comparisons and lazy logic, your ability to say, no, these are not the same, is powerful. It's clarity. It's resistance. It's freedom. And isn't that kind of beautiful? Passive-aggressive comments. What if the meanest things people say don't sound mean at all? It starts small, harmless even. A smile, a casual tone, a phrase that almost sounds like praise. You're brave for wearing that. Wow. I wish I didn't care what people thought. Like you, I could never pull that off, but good for you. It feels off, but only just. Like the words were dipped in sugar, but cut like glass. You pause, you blink, you smile back. Unsure, your brain tries to process. Was that a compliment or something else? That's passive-aggressive. The slow burn, the soft knife. It's not yelling, it's not name-calling, it's not open conflict. It's manipulation, wearing a mask. And the worst part, it's designed to make you feel like the problem, because when you call it out, they shrug. I was just being nice. They'll say, why are you so sensitive? And just like that, you're cornered. Passive-aggressive comments are one of the quietest forms of psychological warfare, a way to deliver criticism without ever sounding critical. They float in the air, coated in politeness, but leave behind confusion, self-doubt, and silence. It's like being slapped with a feather, and the more it happens, the more you begin to question yourself. You replay the words, you hear them in your head hours later, and you wonder, am I imagining things? You're not. You're catching the scent of something darker, a kind of manipulation that hides in plain sight. Let's slow it down. Let's zoom in on how it works. At the heart of a passive-aggressive comment is one goal: control. But it doesn't seek control by force. It seeks control through subtlety, by bending your emotions without ever raising a voice. It might start with something simple. You actually did a good job on this one. Actually, as if it's a surprise, as if you normally fail. Or maybe I didn't expect you to understand this stuff, but you nailed it. Disguised as praise, loaded with insult. It's strategic, because if you defend yourself, you seem petty, overreacting, like you're the one who turned nothing into something. That's the brilliance of it. From the manipulator's point of view, they get to say what they really feel without ever owning it. And the thing is, they often don't even realize they're doing it. Passive aggressiveness is deeply learned behavior. It can come from childhood, from environments where honesty wasn't safe, where being direct led to punishment, rejection, or worse. So instead of saying I'm angry, people learn to say I'm fine with a tone that makes your skin crawl. Instead of I feel threatened, they say must be nice to get all that attention. Instead of I'm jealous, they say you're just lucky, I guess. Every sentence becomes a shield and a weapon. It's not just what's said, it's how it's said, the tone, the timing, the pauses. The passive-aggressive comment leaves just enough space for doubt. That's what makes it powerful. That's what makes it stick. Let's stay here a moment. Let's sit with the feeling of hearing something that unsettles you, but that you can't prove was wrong. That quiet tension. That moment where the smile doesn't quite reach their eyes, where their words leave you feeling smaller, but they didn't technically insult you, and you wonder, why does it bother me so much? Because deep down, you know the truth. Words carry energy, intent. Even when they're wrapped in politeness, they hit differently when there's venom underneath. That's the trick. A passive-aggressive comment weaponizes ambiguity. It stays just vague enough to seem innocent, just sweet enough to seem kind, just clever enough to slip under your defenses. But it leaves a scar, not a deep one, but a layered one, thin, repetitive, quiet, a slow erosion of confidence, a subtle shift in how you see yourself, a hesitation that wasn't there before. And maybe over time, you start second-guessing your clothes, your work, your personality, not because you were directly criticized, but because you were gently mocked under the mask of kindness. This is how control works, not always loudly. Sometimes it whispers, you're so independent, no wonder you're still single. That one stings, not because it's true, but because it's framed like a compliment, and yet the message beneath it is meant to hurt. So why do people use this trick? Because it's safe. It protects their image. They get to express hostility without ever being seen as hostile. Because society rewards politeness, even when it's fake, and punishes confrontation, even when it's honest. Because indirectness creates distance, and for manipulators, that distance is power. But here's the thing, you're allowed to notice the insult, even if it's wearing a smile. You're allowed to trust your gut, even if the words sound nice. You're allowed to say, that felt unnecessary, or was that supposed to be a compliment? Not to start a fight, but to reclaim your clarity, because clarity is the enemy of manipulation. Directness is the antidote to subtle cruelty. Passive-aggressive comments thrive in the fog, in the space between maybe and I'm not sure. So if you shine a light, if you name the game, it often falls apart. But that takes courage, because we're taught to be polite, to not rock the boat, to let small things go. But when the small things stack up, they become heavy. They change you, So the next time someone says, "I didn't expect you to understand that," smile if you want, but know what just happened. You were insulted. The sugar was just a distraction. And if they say, "I was only joking," remind yourself, a joke that punches down isn't funny. It's cruel in costume. You deserve honesty, not perfection, not flattery, just clean, honest interaction. That doesn't mean everyone needs to like you, or that you need to like everyone, but it means you shouldn't have to translate cruelty, decode compliments, or pretend you're fine with being disrespected just because it was said with a grin. Let's sit with that. Let's breathe. Let's recognize that not all attacks are loud. Some of them are whispered, polished, even applauded, but that doesn't make them less real. And if you've ever walked away from a conversation feeling smaller, confused, or like you just lost a battle you didn't even know you were fighting, trust that feeling. It matters, it's valid, it's real, and it's okay to speak up, because kindness isn't confusing, respect doesn't come wrapped in sarcasm, and love doesn't need to disguise itself. So if someone gives you a compliment that feels like a slap, remember this: you didn't imagine it, and you don't have to accept it, not anymore.
Loaded questions. What if the most dangerous lies sound like questions? It doesn't start with yelling. It doesn't start with a fight or a threat. It starts small, just a few words, sometimes even polite, but there's something hiding inside them. Why are you always so difficult? Don't you care about me at all? Are you really going to wear that? They're questions, but they're not really asking anything. They're loaded, already carrying a hidden weight. You don't notice it right away. At first they seem like normal things people say, annoying, maybe, but harmless, until something in your stomach tightens. You try to answer, but there's no good way to respond. No matter what you say, you lose. That's a loaded question. It's not a search for truth. It's a trap dressed up like curiosity. It's an accusation, hiding inside punctuation. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. It stays with you, because a loaded question isn't meant to understand you. It's meant to control you. Let's slow down for a moment. Think back. Maybe there was a time someone asked you something that just didn't sit right. You didn't know why. It wasn't what they said. It was how they said it, or what they meant underneath the words. That's the trick. The real power of a loaded question isn't what you hear. It's what it implies. Take this. "Why are you always late?" Seems simple, but hidden inside it is a judgment. That you're always late, that it's a problem, that you failed. The question isn't neutral. It already decided who you are, and now you're on the defensive, trying to prove something, even if you're not late, even if this is the first time. The moment you answer, you've already accepted the story they wrote about you. This is how manipulation works. Not with commands, but with frames, because in a loaded question, the frame is everything. The way the question is built tells your brain what to focus on, and before you even realize it, you're arguing on someone else's terms. They didn't have to prove you were wrong. They just made you try to prove you were right, and that's where the power lives. Not in facts, but in control of the narrative. Loaded questions create a world where you're already guilty, already wrong, already broken. You don't get to ask, "Wait, why do you think that?" Because you're too busy answering a question that should never have been asked. It's subtle, quiet, but it cuts deep. And the scariest part, sometimes, the person asking the question doesn't even realize they're doing it. They're just repeating patterns, old tricks learned from parents, teachers, lovers, passed down like shadows. But sometimes, they do know, and when they do, loaded questions become weapons. They're used in arguments, in relationships, in jobs, used to twist people into shapes they never meant to become, used to make someone feel guilty for being themselves, to corner them, to silence them. Imagine this.
Don't you think you're being a little selfish? Now you're not discussing the situation. You're defending your character. You've been pulled out of the moment and into self-doubt. The topic has shifted. And so has your power. You weren't selfish. You were honest. You were asking for space. But now you feel like you did something wrong. That's the genius. And the danger of a loaded question. It feels like conversation, but it's not. It's performance. A performance with only one role for you. The villain. And if you're not careful, you'll start to believe it. You'll start asking yourself those same questions. Why can't I be better? What's wrong with me? Am I the problem? That's when the manipulation has taken root. It's moved inside your mind. You've swallowed the story someone else wrote about you, and now you're telling it to yourself. But it doesn't have to stay that way. You can learn to spot these tricks. You can step outside the frame, ask new questions, honest ones, like what's really being said here? What is this person trying to make me feel? Do I have to answer this? Because here's the truth. You don't. You don't have to answer a loaded question. You don't have to defend yourself against something that wasn't fair in the first place. You can say, that feels like a setup. You can say, let's talk about what you're really asking. You can say nothing at all, and in that silence, you take back your power, because the real danger of a loaded question is not the words. It's the doubt they plant. But once you name it, once you see the strings, it starts to lose its grip. You begin to notice how often it happens in the media, in politics, in marketing, in families. Why are you so emotional? Why can't you be more like your sister? Why would you think that? Each one tiny darts of control. They don't scream, they whisper. They make you feel smaller, like you're missing something obvious, like you owe someone an explanation just for existing as you are. But you don't. You are not obligated to answer every question, especially not the ones that are really just judgments in disguise. Remember that. Next time someone throws a sentence shaped like a question, but sharpened like a knife, pause. Don't rush to respond. Let it hang in the air. Let the silence reveal its shape. Then if you choose, ask a question of your own, one that doesn't trap, one that doesn't accuse, one that opens instead of closes, because the antidote to manipulation is clarity, and the moment you recognize the game, you're no longer playing it. So ask yourself now, what questions have been asked of you that were never really yours to answer? What beliefs did they carry? What stories did they plant? And are you still carrying them? Let them go. Speak in your own voice. Ask your own questions. And never forget, just because someone says it like a question, doesn't mean it deserves your answer. And that's power. Real power. The kind that doesn't control others, but frees you. And in a world full of loaded questions, that kind of clarity is rare and kind of beautiful.